Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Political Forum. My name is Mike Jacobson, and joining us tonight is Aaron Goldstein, a candidate for Illinois Attorney General. Thank you very much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure. Thank you all for watching.
All right, so this now is your opportunity. If you have a question, comment, or concern for the candidate, the number's at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. That's 312-738-1060. And please let everyone know that they can see us on cable television in Chicago, channel 21, and also online at cantv.org/hotline. All right, candidate Goldstein, so let's start off. So for folks who may not know much about you, why don't you explain yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Aaron Goldstein. I'm running for Attorney General for the Democratic nomination. I've been an attorney for a little over 17 years, and most of my career has been as a public defender. When I was in law school, I worked for the Legal Assistance Foundation and the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless. While I was with the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless, I represented homeless school children who were being discriminated against because they were homeless. We actually were part of a lawsuit that stopped that. When I graduated law school, I became a public defender, and I've worked there for about 10 years. I'm currently on leave as I'm campaigning. And I've done that because I believe in some fundamental things. One, in the human dignity of us all. Two, in the right to counsel, which are just not some words on a piece of paper, but an actual moral contract. And three, I know this criminal justice system to be racist and unfair. And I fought to do that. So that's what I've done as an attorney, and that's what I'm doing to become Attorney General, is to fight for justice for us all.
All right, so actually I'm going to show people how they can learn more about you on your website, which is ag4ag.org. You can find some videos. You can learn more about Aaron Goldstein, learn how to contact him, how to join his emails, and the like. So that's it. It's at ag4ag.org. Okay, so you're quoted as saying your first priority as Attorney General is that you want to fight for the people of Illinois, and you also want to make sure that you are for the Illinois and also for the U.S. Constitution, and you call yourself the People's Defender. But a lot of people may not know what the role is for a state Attorney General. So can you please explain that too?
Yeah. So first and foremost, the role of Attorney General is to be the attorney for the people, to stand up for all of us. And that's going in the courtroom and defending the people of the state of Illinois. The second role is to be an advocate as far as legislation, to going to the legislature and saying these are the laws that need changing. And the third role is to be an advisor to the legislature and to talk to them and say, you guys are trying to pass a law, but we believe it doesn't pass constitutional muster. So it's those three roles that are most important, but the most fundamental is to defend the people, to stand up for the people and be their advocate.
So with your work as a Cook County Public Defender in the Cook County Public Defender's Office, how does that experience translate into this office?
Yeah, so I'm the only candidate who actually represents people. I don't represent corporations. I'm not a prosecutor on behalf of the big governmental entity that's prosecuting someone. Right next to me every single day when I'm in court is an individual who depends on me to stand up for them. And that's what I want to do as Attorney General. So that's the perspective I come from. Also, as a defense attorney, I've also been a civil rights attorney in private practice. I've handled thousands and thousands of cases, hundreds of trials. I've done nearly 40 jury trials in federal court and state court, civil and criminal. So I have that background on being an actual trial lawyer, which I think is so important in this office.
All right, folks, and you have a question for candidate Aaron Goldstein. The number again is at the bottom of the screen, 312-738-1060. All right, so now you've come out and you've got what's called as a bold, progressive agenda with three important planks. So if we have time, we're going to go through each one of those planks. So the first one is fighting the big banks, big corporations, even including Donald Trump.
Yes.
So explain that.
Well, let's work backwards. Donald Trump is basically violating the law and the Constitution every single day. And as Attorney General, what we've seen is that attorneys general throughout the country have actually realized their power to standing up to who is a tyrant, and that's what Donald Trump is. So I will stand up to him every single day. I will take him to court on any legal action that he presents, and he's presented many of them, unfortunately. So that's number one, standing up to the big corporations and the big banks. The people are getting hurt every single time from improper fees and being taken advantage of by the banks. Environmental protections are being taken advantage of by the corporations, and the federal government has abdicated their responsibility so that now the Illinois Attorney General has to step up. So that's standing up to those big powers, and that's what I'll do. That's the first plank.
Before we get a little further, it looks like we have our first call. So, caller, are you there? Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, good afternoon, sir.
Good
I
afternoon.
want to know, I'm going to ask you a question, but don't answer it right away because I have a comment after it. Are you for or against sanctuary cities? Now my comment is this. A sanctuary city is supposed to be a safe zone. There's not a safe zone in Chicago right now.
I think we lost him during his explanation. But first, he wants to know, are you for or against Chicago as a sanctuary city?
100% for. And really the fundamental basis of a sanctuary city is to say, we as a municipality, we as a state, we are not going to dedicate those local resources to deputize them to become ICE agents to kick people out who are immigrants. I completely oppose what the federal government is doing with DACA recipients, and I absolutely abhor it. And to the extent that I can protect the immigrants in this state, I will do everything I possibly can. But what sanctuary city means is that we're going to dedicate our resources to what we think are most important: violent crime, other issues, not kicking immigrants out who are here to try and help their family and looking for a better life.
And I think that the other side of that story is that where people may not be for sanctuary cities because they believe that it could be taking away from people's jobs, and livelihoods. So I think that's where people think that they might not want to be a sanctuary city. What's your comment to that?
That's divide and conquer politics, and that's just the reality, unfortunately. What we're trying to do is we're trying to divide the people that should be united. To somehow think that your enemy is an immigrant who's poor, who comes to this country for better opportunities, somehow the enemy of a citizen who's trying to get a job and do best for their family. The reality is we have to look at the top. The individuals that are taking advantage of us, the corporations and the big powers and banks that are taking advantage of us, and stop fighting amongst each other, because that's what they want us to do.
All right. Thank you, caller, for that question. It looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there?
Hi, yes. What are your plans regarding gun control in Chicago?
Thank you for the question. As far as gun control, it's the same theme, and that's looking to the top. Number one, we have gun manufacturers throughout this entire country who are inundated our communities with guns. If you look at simple supply and demand, the supply way overestimates and supersedes the demand for it. So why are they doing it? Why are they inundating our communities with guns? I think there's some potential good litigation against the gun manufacturers. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there's actual immunity for gun manufacturers federally. No other company, no other manufacturer actually has that immunity. It makes no sense, but there are exceptions to it. I will look for every exception to go after the gun manufacturers. In addition, we need to go after the ones that are bringing in guns into our state, and that's particularly Indiana and Mississippi. We have to do everything we can. We have to strengthen our laws too. Common sense gun reform is just, it should be common sense, but for whatever reason it isn't. So I would advocate for like a gun dealer licensing bill. I'm a big proponent of that. We need to ban AR assault rifles. It makes no sense. No one should be holding on to those guns, so those need to be banned. But that's on the legislation front. As far as what an attorney general can do, I'm looking at the gun manufacturers.
You mentioned the immunity?
Yes. There's federal immunity for the gun manufacturers, basically that area of business.
Yeah.
No other business has it. The car manufacturers don't have it. The kitchen supply manufacturers don't have it. The gun manufacturers have it. But pay very close attention to Newtown, Connecticut. That tragedy that happened in the school, the families have sued that gun manufacturer for what they did for bringing in that gun. And it's now before the Supreme Court to decide whether there's immunity for them or not. If they can prevail, that can be a potential for us to go after the gun manufacturers here in Illinois.
We'll get more on that topic, but it looks like we have another caller. Caller, you're there.
Yes, and good evening. And you are so right on that last phrase there. We need to stop the certain guns that's being sold. If we could stop that, if it was a handgun, he wouldn't be able to do that. But listen, the sanctuary city, I admire what you said about that. I totally believe in the sanctuary city. We should never change that. And I can't understand why Hispanics are not jumping on the bandwagon for that. They not for that. But either here go, I think it's a wonderful thing. Now the big question I want to ask you, how do you compare Kim Fields now? And that's, hold on, I'm not going to ask you to compare anyone. How do you like what Kim Fields doing down there at 26th Street, and how do you think Roney is doing down there with the investigators? So I know you keep in contact with those people. So just a quick opinion. And as far as I'm concerned, partner, you got my vote. Let me get out there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you're talking about Kim Fox, the state's attorney of Cook County. I was a big supporter of hers, and I think she's doing a real good job. We have reduced our jail population in Cook County from a little over 11,000 last year or thereabouts to around 6,000 now. Now, that's not all the prosecutors. As a public defender, the public defenders have done a great job. The judges have done a good job. All of Cook County have done a very good job. Now, I think it's too late, unfortunately. We should have done this a long time ago. But hey, we have a lot of success, and I support a lot of what she's been doing. So yes, I'm a fan of Kim Fox.
Thank you for that question. All right, so let's get back now because we were talking about your agenda and the planks. And one, we talked about fighting the big banks, big corporation, Donald Trump. The number two is real criminal justice reform. And please unpack this because there's a lot to this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. We mentioned a little bit about State's Attorney Fox. So number one, and the first two are really sort of two sides to the same coin, and that is ending mass incarceration and ending this drug war. The drug war is nothing else than a racist plan. That's the reality. We will look back on it, whether it's today, tomorrow, or 50 years from now, as one of the worst domestic policies this country has ever gone through over the last 5 or so decades. And we really have proof. Richard Nixon is on tape talking about why he wanted to increase this drug war, create this drug war, which was basically to go after African Americans, go after the hippies. This was a political move that he instituted or really accelerated back in the late 60s, early 70s. So we need to stop that. We need to legalize marijuana. We need to decriminalize and move on. And stop incarcerating people because they have an addiction problem. That has done us no good at all. In fact, the addiction rates aren't going down at all. They're going up. You look at Portugal. Portugal specifically has legalized all drugs. Their addiction rates are the lowest in the world. So we need to, at the very least, decriminalize and move people out of incarceration, give people rehabilitation and treatment, and that'll fix a lot of problems. We see it in the opioid crisis. At the very least, we're calling this a public health crisis. 10 years ago, we'd be incarcerating everyone, right? So at least now, we're calling this a public health crisis, so that's one benefit. So those are the first two planks. Number three is cash bail, and Kim Fox has done very well, and we've done well in Cook County. No one should be sitting in jail because they cannot afford $100 to post for bond. That makes no sense. You are innocent until proven guilty. And to be sitting in jail, awaiting trial, because you can't post a certain amount of money to get out of jail is reprehensible, it's unconstitutional, and we should stop that practice throughout all of the state. The fourth part of that is real police accountability and having real police reform. Now, what happened, just a little history, to this, President Obama had an investigation. They came up with a huge report, and the report specifically said that there were all these abuses that the Chicago Police Department was going through. And they put a federal monitor in. President Trump came in, Jeff Sessions withdrew that federal monitor. Lisa Madigan then filed suit to get what's called a consent decree against the Chicago Police Department. I agree with that lawsuit, but she's missing one very important point, and that is we must have community involvement, community enforcement power. Those other lawsuits that are by community members, community organizations, they must have the enforcement power to go into court and enforce that consent decree if we get it.
Well, thank you for that. So that's now two of the planks. We'll get to the third plank a little later on, but it looks like we have another caller. Caller, are you there? Question or comment?
Hello, Mr. Goldstein. How you doing this evening?
Good. How are you?
I'm okay. This is Paula. I live out here on the 31st Ward for 29 years. I've been a citizen of Chicago for quite a long time. I'd like to get back to that gun situation we got going here. I don't care how many laws you got, who can get a gun, who can't get a gun, what shop sells a gun. If a person wants to get a gun, they're going to get a gun.
Okay.
You know, it's actually a very good point, which is why we have to go after the gun manufacturers, because the supply is way overmatched compared to the demand, and we have gun manufacturers that are specifically putting in these guns in our communities. You know, a very interesting thing. Remember in 2008 when President Obama became president, and you saw the gun rates, the manufacturing and the gun sales just almost triple, right? They were going crazy, and I thought it was, you know, it was a very racist thing that somehow this black man is going to take away your guns. And they were feeding into it, the gun manufacturers. They knew exactly what they were doing. So in many ways, laws can be somewhat ineffective. I respectfully disagree that they're completely ineffective, because if we can control these gun manufacturers and say, you're going to be held liable when these school shootings happen because you didn't take in the proper precautions to make sure that whoever's getting a gun, you know, is a responsible individual getting that gun, which is the precedent for all other, businesses. These gun manufacturers are going to change their way.
Because on that the gun conversation, there's talk, you know, the state registers cars and people take tests to drive them. So then, could there something similar be, you know, on the state level concerning guns?
Absolutely, and why not have insurance for any gun owner? Because what does that do? There are, you know, people that own guns that don't commit crimes. They are truly using it for self-defense, but they may be negligent in how they hand it off to someone. This is a dangerous weapon, right? You don't need me to tell you that. If you have insurance and you can be held liable if you're just sort of handing it off to your cousin who then gives it to someone else to use for a bad reason, you should potentially be held liable, because that's the same for any other product. So we have to give them, at the very least, the same protections that we have for every other business entity.
Well, thank you, caller, for your point. And so now let's get to the third plank, you know, on your agenda. First was, you know, fighting big banks, big corporations, Donald Trump. Second was looking for real criminal justice reform. And the last one is fighting corruption and the need for transparency.
Yeah, so there's two bookends to fighting corruption. The first bookend is to make sure we have a transparent government. And that's through two basic things. One is the Open Meetings Act, which requires that all public meetings, all meetings within government, be held out in the open. The more you have it behind closed doors, the more is susceptible to corruption. We need to stop that. Number two is FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, which, you know, if you want documents from your local government, you can make a FOIA request. And those requests, if they're legal, should be upheld. And what's happening is, when the government, the local municipality, does not respond to those FOIA requests, it goes to what's called the Public Access Counselor, which is an entity within the Attorney General's office. A report after 2016 indicated that 20% of all the referrals that went to the Attorney General's office were not resolved. These are issues regarding police reform, to get information about police-involved shootings that were never resolved because the Public Access Counselor was not able to resolve those things. So we need to beef up that and get more resources, get more funding, and we have to be more efficient in resolving those FOIA requests. So that's the first part of fighting corruption. The second part is when corruption occurs and you get any information regarding any potential corruption, I will prosecute those cases. If we have credible information that in any individual, any politician is acting in a corrupt manner, we will prosecute them. And the unfortunate reality is, in 2003, Lisa Madigan specifically said that corruption would be a top priority, even if it meant investigating her father. It's now 2018, and look what's been done. Very little. I will do something when it comes to corruption.
So along those lines, I believe one of the previous callers mentioned Governor Rauner, if he's still in office. So leading into the role, if you were elected, how do you see yourself and the role of the Attorney General in dealing with state government, both the governor and also the state legislators?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that I can work with the governor, I will do that. But here's the reality. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican and you're the governor. I'm an independent body, and that will be my job. So if I believe that a Democrat is committing corruption, is being corrupt in some way, I don't care. Because I'm the independent body who's the attorney for the people. And we don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're hurting the people, I'm going to stand up for you. So really my vision and what the Attorney General really should be is an attorney for the people who's independent of all the other politicians.
Also, one of the issues is environmental issues in the state. And there's a lot of concerns both in Chicago and all throughout the state of Illinois. And so what's the role of the Attorney General's office for that as well?
You know, on environmental issues, it's a huge role that the Attorney General has, and really has a ton of power when it comes to environmental issues. And here's the reality. I've been throughout the entire state. And one commonality amongst us all is the realization that a lot of people are being adversely affected by environmental pollution. Whether it's the southeast side of Chicago when it comes to manganese, or the Muhammad Aquifer in central Illinois where people's gas is polluting the water. All of us are seeing the adverse effects of environmental pollution. The issue on manganese in the southeast side, I spoke to some community members there. They talked about how that there was actually a report that said kids were found with manganese in their toenails. This is a neurotoxin, high levels of manganese found in their toenails. They reported it to the Attorney General's office. To date, nothing has been done about it. The Attorney General can go into court tomorrow and get an injunction to make sure that they clean it up or stop their polluting practices. We need to be more proactive as the Attorney General, and that's what I'll do.
So it looks like we're about a couple minutes left in the show, but also continuing your platform, the platform you're running on also would legalize marijuana. We haven't touched on that, so explain that as well too.
Yeah, and it goes into the whole drug war thing. And what are sort of the three sins, so to speak, as far as intoxication, and that's cigarettes and alcohol and marijuana. Two of them are legal, one of them is not. And there's a very good argument to be made, and I subscribe to this, that marijuana is actually healthier than alcohol and cigarettes. There's no medicinal value to cigarettes. Alcohol, arguably, there is some health benefit, but marijuana actually has health benefits. So why it is illegal, why we're incarcerating people for marijuana makes no sense whatsoever. So it's a fairness issue, it's a justice issue, it's a racial justice issue, because we know the great majority of people who are being thrown into jail for using marijuana are African Americans, people of color. So that's an issue as well. And then it's just a simple revenue issue. We are going to find out, it's the law of diminishing returns. At some point, the entire country is going to legalize marijuana. And if Illinois is the first one to do it in the Midwest, now you've got Iowa and Missouri and Indiana, Wisconsin. They're all coming to Illinois for what's called marijuana tourism. Colorado knows this very well. And they are benefiting from it as far as revenue. We can clean up a lot of our revenue problems with the legalization of marijuana. We can actually put people to work selling marijuana and growing marijuana. So it's a great opportunity. It's the right thing to do. And we need to legalize it right now.
Also, before we wrap up, I want to make sure we talk on this point too. Is Doc? A lot of people are concerned, with all the rhetoric coming out of Washington D.C. What do you think again is the state's attorney's role for this?
Yeah. So I mean, look, we should all be concerned. This is a very scary thing. What Donald Trump is doing. He's a tyrant going after immigrants. So the Attorney General has a lot of power in protecting immigrants. And we saw that just recently when it came to Sanctuary City in Chicago. When the city declared that it was going to be a sanctuary city, Donald Trump threatened to remove federal funds if they didn't comply. Lisa Madigan took them to court and actually was successful. They got to make sure that those federal funds now come to the city, but they were successful in that. On every issue when it comes to DACA and supporting sanctuary cities, any city within the state that wants to do it, I will defend them.
All right, so it looks like we're beginning to wrap up the show. So now I give the floor to you. So please tell people, about yourself and why they should vote for you on March 20th.
Yeah, thank you all for listening and watching. You can find out more about me on my website. Look, what I'm about is justice. I follow a very simple biblical quote, which is Deuteronomy 16:20, "Justice thou shalt pursue." And that's what I want to do as Attorney General. I want justice for us all. I want to stand up for all of us, follow the Constitution, and be an attorney for all of us. So whether that's standing up to the big powers and Donald Trump, whether that's getting real criminal justice reform or fighting corruption, I'm going to be attorney for all of us. And I hope I can earn your support.
Well, I just want to show people your website one more time. They can go to agforag.org to learn more about you and ways to contact you and so on and so forth. Well, Candidate Goldstein, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it. And so thank you all to the callers also for calling in. Thank you to Sylvia for answering the phones. Remember that the primary is on March 20th. I urge everyone out there to vote. And until then, we will see you next week. This has been Political Forum on CAN TV. Have a good day.